Today we are looking at the topic of capacitors for A-level physics. So capacitors store charge, that is the whole point of them. So I'm going to look at how they do that a little bit later, along with how to calculate how much charge they store. But you might find capacitors in these kind of situations. So camera flashes in defibrillators, so to restart someone's heart or to regulate the rhythm again. And they're designed to be used in those situations because they release a large amount of energy really quickly. They're also used in things like timing circuits, where timing's important, and when a power output is not constant, they can often be used to smooth out power output when needed. Now in a circuit like this, when I've got a voltmeter across the capacitor and an ammeter, if I was to measure the potential difference versus the charge, and charge in this circuit I do by measuring the current, assuming it's constant, by the variable resistor times by the time, we'd find they have a directly proportional relationship. Now if I found the gradient of that line, that can tell me the capacitance. So the capacitance we define as the charge per unit potential difference. So in equation terms, that would be capacitance C equals Q divided by V. Now the unit for the capacitance is the farad, named after Michael Faraday, or measured in farads. Quite often you'll see these in micro, milli or nanofarads. It's quite a small unit, usually because the amount of charge stored in 1 volt is quite small. A graph of charge and potential difference allows us to calculate the energy stored. Now the overall general equation for energy stored or work done is equal to charge times by PD, which will be represented by the area under a charge PD graph. And now in this case, our area is going to be a triangle. So the equation for the area of a triangle is half times by charge times by PD. Now we can substitute in our equation for capacitance, so C equals Q over V, in a couple of different ways to get a couple of variants of this equation. So the first one is that energy is equal to VC times by V, or half CV squared, and the next one is equal to half Q, and substituting for V, Q over C, which gives us half Q squared over C. Now sometimes it'll be really obvious which of those equations to use. However, in some situations they might give you lots of different information in a question, so how do we work out which one to use? Now, just like you would do with a SUVAT equation, you've got to look for what you're given in a question and what you're trying to find out. Now, the capacitance of the capacitor is almost always going to be constant in questions like this, but for a equation where you've got the capacitor connected to the cell, the potential difference across the capacitor is going to be constant because it's getting the potential difference from the cell, let's say 6 volts. However, if you were to disconnect it, the potential difference might not be constant, but the charge will be, because as we'll look at later, the electrons will remain in place, so the charge will be constant. So in that case, we'd use half Q squared over C. So let's look at how a capacitor works then. Now you have to be really careful with your language here in terms of how you're describing how it works, and make sure you understand it, because it does help make sense of some of the equations we use later, if you can understand what is actually going on with the capacitor charging and discharging. So we'll deal with charging up first. So let's say I close this switch. I've got a very simple circuit with a cell and a capacitor in it. As soon as I close the switch, electrons experience electrostatic repulsion or are repelled away from the negative terminal of the cell. That means in this case they're going to go sort of clockwise around the circuit, sort of away from the cell towards that first plate. Now it's important to note that the capacitor has a gap or an insulator between the two plates, so they cannot cross that point, so therefore electrons will accumulate or sort of build up on one side of the capacitor. Now this makes it a negative plate. It's important to note it's not negative to begin with, it's only got a negative charge because those electrons have started to build up there. Now at the same time, the reverse happens on the right hand side of this circuit. So that means that electrons that are near the positive terminal of the cell are going to have electrostatic attraction this time. So they're going to feel attractive force from the positive side of the cell, which means they're going to go towards it. So in this case they're going to go continuing clockwise, but around the other side. So note how they're not crossing the gap, but these electrons are already in the wire. They are now going towards the positive terminal of the cell. So what that means, with an absence of electrons on the other side or the other plate of the capacitor, because electrons have been attracted towards the positive end of the cell, they're also repelled away by those other electrons building up. An absence of electrons means you have an overall positive charge. The positive charges haven't moved, they're just what's left behind once the electrons have started to leave. So therefore we have our two plates, one charged positively, one charged negatively. This is how it's able to store charge. So that means I can take away the cell. I don't need it anymore. If I've charged up my capacitor, it's stored a charge already. I could connect it to a bulb or a motor or something like that, and it would be able to, the electrons would go around the circuit as it discharges, and it'll be able to provide electrical current, electrical power to whatever you put there as well. And it sort of acts a bit like a cell. So let's have a look at discharging. Now, discharging would be across a resistor, usually quite a high resistance resistor, and basically the reverse happens. The electrons will go back round the original way. There's a potential difference driving them round, so this will go anti-clockwise, meaning that the potential difference across the capacitor would decrease to 0 over time because the charge is decreasing to 0 across the two plates. Next, what we're going to look at is what graphs of, first of all, current and time look like for a discharging capacitor. So in this case, obviously I need an ammeter in the circuit to measure the current through the circuit, but really important to note is just if you've understood the explanation previously about how the electrons move, we should note that the current, the rate of flow of electrons, is highest at the start. This is because that's when there's the greatest potential difference that's going to sort of drive them around the circuit. So it'll be the highest at the start, meaning that the current is going to be highest at the start. And the graph follows this shape here, which is exponential decay, which we'll look at a bit later. The reason the current is so low later is because as the capacitor charges, the electrons will receive overall less of a potential difference overall than they were previously. If it gets close to 6 volts across the capacitor, they're going to be slightly attracted towards that, slightly attracted towards the cell, and therefore they kind of balance out a little bit. Now, if we look at a graph of potential difference in time or charge in time, the graphs look a bit different. Now, potential difference has to start off at 0. If I'm going to put a voltmeter across my capacitor, it has to start off on 0 because it's just two pieces of metal initially, and it's going to increase over time. And the shape is actually the inverse of the current time graph, and that's because current is highest initially. So as a high current, that means that the increase in PD is going to be highest initially as well. Now, because PD is proportional to charge, the charge time graph looks exactly the same. I know the curves are slightly different there, just because I'm drawing them quickly. They should look identical for a charging circuit. Now, the equation or the expression to calculate the potential difference at any point or the charge at any point looks a bit like this. So when we're trying to find Q or V at any time t, R here is the resistance, C is the capacitance. We'll come on to what the time constant is a little bit later. But the important thing to note is that V0 or Q0 here, this isn't the initial voltage or the initial charge, because that would obviously be 0. It's the maximum potential difference or maximum charge that the capacitor can hold or can store. Now let's look at a discharging circuit. It's probably the one you would have done for a required practical. It's much, I'd say, more likely to come up in exam questions, so definitely worth learning both, but this one, it comes up in a required practical. It's worth learning this especially. So here's the circuit we'd use, and we've got a capacitor with a voltmeter across it, discharging across a resistor. If you want to have a circuit to do both, you can see the circuit I'm drawing here. If you are able to switch the flying lead to the left-hand side, that then charges the capacitor next to the cell, and then if you charge it to put it to the right-hand side, you disconnect that bit of the circuit and you can measure the potential difference across the capacitor as it discharges across the resistor. So the current time graph for a discharging capacitor looks exactly the same as it was before, and the reason is exactly the same. The idea is it's got 6 volts across it. There's no volts anywhere else in the circuit. Once the circuit is complete, the electrons are going to want to be driven by the potential difference to go around the circuit, so the discharge happens really quickly at the start with the highest rate of flow of charge. Now, the potential difference follows the same pattern for this graph. It's going to be highest at the start. It's going to follow that exponential decay downwards. That's because in this case the voltage is proportional to the current, and the Q is proportional, the charge is proportional potential difference as well. So, like I said there, this is exhibiting something called exponential decay, which you might have come across if you've done the radioactivity topic as well. So what does that mean? Well, exponential decay means anything that follows this form of equation. All these equations follow the same format, but this time I0, Q0 and V0 is the initial potential difference or charge or current, whatever you're talking about. Okay, so we're going to derive one of these equations or show you where it comes from. You would never know us to derive the full thing, but I think it's interesting to look at where it comes from. So let's start off with our definition for current. So current equals potential difference over resistance. We said earlier C equals Q over V, so therefore V potential difference equals Q over C. So I can substitute that in and get I equals Q over RC. Now, for a very small change in charge, so an infinitesimally small change in an infinitesimally small amount of time, we can have, so delta Q is equal to I times delta T, or Q equals IT, and it's going to be negative, so therefore, because it's a decrease in charge. So what we then have, if I substitute in my expression for I from above, I now have delta Q equals minus Q over RC times by a change in time. Now I can rearrange this equation a little bit to find the rate of change of charge, so delta Q over delta T, and that equals minus Q over RC. Now, as we talked about earlier, R is resistance, C is capacitance, which are both constants. You're not changing those in this circuit. So what that means is that the change in charge over time is proportional to the amount of charge there is remaining, which is the definition for something that shows exponential decay. So basically, the less charge there is remaining, the less the rate of change of charge will be, or the less the current will be. To be able to prove this from a graph like this, if it's just an exponential decay graph, you just go across, you'd find the amount of time it takes for it to halve, for example, and then do it again to quarter, to eighth, and you should find it's the same amount of time to halve each time, therefore proving it's exponential. Now you can make the same arguments for potential difference and for the current graphs, because the two things are proportional to each other. Now, we don't really talk about half-lives here with capacitance, unlike in radioactivity. We usually talk about time constants. Now, time constant equals R resistance times C capacitance. You might find it uses the symbol tau in some exam boards, not in AQA. And what it means is when the time equals to RC, the time has passed is equal to the time constant, that means we're going to have T over RC is equal to 1. So therefore, our expression is I equals I naught, the initial current, times by e to the power minus 1. Now, that e to the power minus 1 is about 0.3678, something like that, which rounds to 37%. So that means one time constant is the time taken for the current or the potential difference or the charge to fall to 37% of its original or its initial value. Now it's quite useful to look at here how can we prove that time constants measured in seconds. So I've got resistance times by capacitance. Let's express R in terms of V over I and capacitance in terms of Q over V. We should see the V's cancel here, giving Q over I, which rearranges for time, which is in seconds. So it kind of makes sense that those things all equal out in our equation. And normally for time constants, to measure in a practical, you're going to want something in the order of sort of hundreds of seconds to allow you to measure a reasonable amount of readings on our circuit. A really common form of type of question you could get given doesn't give you V or V naught, but they'll give you an expression like, I don't know, 20% of it is remaining or 5% of it is gone. In that case, it's really important that you divide V by V naught, and then you can have V over V naught equals e to the power minus T over RC. That should be missed the C out there for some reason. And then that expression is 0.2. So you don't need to know both to be able to answer a question like that. To be able to plot a graph and find the time constant graphically, like in the required practical, we need to take natural logs of both sides. So I can get down the index from Euler's number and use it and actually work it out. So that gives us ln V, a natural log of V equals ln V naught minus T over RC. Now I'm going to rearrange this slightly to get into the form Y equals mx plus C if my ln V is my y-axis and T is my x-axis. In that case, I then have ln V equals minus 1 over RC times by T plus ln V naught, meaning that gradient for my graph is going to be equal to minus 1 over RC. So that I can rearrange that and find the time constant. And usually I can compare that in the practical to the value it was if I multiply R times C and see how close it was. Next, let's talk about the capacitor itself. What would an ideal capacitor look like to maximize its capacitance? So they're quite small to put in circuits. Obviously, they need to be in a camera flash. The ones you've used in class are normally about the size of sort of a finger or a thumb, and they wrap together the two plates really tightly together. The idea is to have the maximum area of overlap between two plates and have the minimum distance between them. So we have quite a thin insulator between them. And they also have to have a really effective insulator between them, which is usually called a dielectric, and we'll come on to what those are usually made of and how they work a bit later. So the equation for capacitance involving those parameters is C equals the area of overlap in meters squared times by the permittivity of free space times by relative permittivity, all divided by the distance between these plates. So you show those relationships to be able to answer questions about this. Permittivity of free space is a measure really of how easy it is for an electric field to form. It's a constant on your equation sheet, 8.85 times 10 to the minus 12 farads per meter here. Relative permittivity is a bit of a new one. So relative permittivity, we can define a couple of ways. My best way is to define it like this. It's the capacitance with the dielectric in place divided by the capacitance with no dielectric, just with free space between the plates. Now, obviously, if you're putting a dielectric in, you're supposed to be improving the capacitor. So let's say you've improved it, have given it a capacitance twice as big as it was originally, then the relative permittivity would be 2. If you made it 100 times better, 100 times the capacitance, then the relative permittivity would be 100. It's just a number. You generally want good capacitors. We're talking about the dielectrics you put in there, like quartz or something like that, hundreds, 400, 500 times better than if there was just free space. So let's look at how do dielectrics work. These can be quite tricky. There's a little bit of chemistry involved as well to explain exactly how they make a capacitor better. So the general idea is we actually want there to be less of an electric field formed than there is without any dielectric in the space between two plates. So you want an electrically insulating material. We use something called polar molecules. Now, polar molecules, if you do A-level chemistry, you'll know all about them. If you don't worry. They just have a positive and a negative end due to the distribution of the electrons. That's all we need to know really for this part of the physics course. And now what they do, they will align. Once you switch on the circuit with a capacitor in it, they will align so the negative charges line up with the positive plate and the positive charges line up with the negative plate. So when this happens, you actually manage to reduce the electric field strength of each plate. So that's capital E. Now, in a uniform field, electric field strength is potential difference divided by the distance between the plates. Distance is constant, so that means potential difference has dropped as well. Now, if you remember, the definition for capacitance was charge over PD. If I drop the potential difference, that means my capacitor has gone up. The capacitance has gone up, meaning I've made a better capacitance. So the PD stored decreases, meaning the ratio of Q over V has increased, meaning there's a higher capacitance. That's quite a tricky part of the course. Make sure you've practiced a couple of exam questions on it as well. And there you go, there's the video on capacitors. Give it a like if you found this useful, and see you next time.